Jungkook stood at the edge of his glass-walled office, gazing out over the sprawling city from the 70th floor of JK Corporation's headquarters. The world below seemed insignificant, cars waving like ants, neon billboards flickering against the evening sky, and skyscrapers standing tall yet never quite reaching his level. The view was breathtaking, yet it felt hollow. Power, wealth, influence, he had it all. His decisions shaped industries. His presence commanded fear and respect in equal measure. Yet a stranger restlessness ground at him, and each beneath his skin that no amount of success could seem to scratch. It was an unfamiliar feeling, and Jungkook hated anything he couldn't control. A quiet knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Sir," came the smooth practiced voice of his long-time secretary, Miss Kim. "Your new assistant is here." Jungkook turned slowly, his sharp gaze landing first on Miss Kim, composed as always, dressed in a sleek grey suit, her clipboard tucked neatly against her side. But it was the figure standing beside her that caught his attention. The newcomer was young, no older than his mid-twenties, with striking jet black hair that framed his sharp features. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored black suit, crisp and polished. Yet there was something about the way he carried to himself, too controlled, too careful, as if he were measuring each moment. But it wasn't just his posture that stood out, it was his eyes, piercing green, an unusual color, striking and intense, as if they saw more than they let on. "This is Taehyung," Miss Kim introduced. "He'll be taking over as your personal assistant." Jungkook's gaze lingered on the man in front of him. Taehyung met his stare with a hesitant smile. Not nervous, not overly eager, just unreadable. Something about him felt off, not in an obvious way. His credentials were impeccable, his demeanor professional, his presence unassuming, and yet Jungkook's instincts, honed through years of reading people, told him this wasn't just an ordinary assistant stepping into his new role. No, Taeyang was something else entirely. The only question was, what was he hiding? Taeyang's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he followed Jungkook down the sleek, marble-lined corridor leading to the CEO's private office. The faint echo of their footsteps was the only sound between them, stretching the silence into something almost oppressive. He had heard plenty of rumors about Jungkook, the ruthless, enigmatic CEO of JK Corporation, a man whose name carried power, whose presence alone could intimidate the strongest of businessmen. Some claimed he was impossible to please, that his temper was sharp, his expectations even sharper. Tiang wasn't easily shaken, but as he walked behind the man who now held his career in his hands, he couldn't deny the weight pressuring against his chest. Still, he straightened his shoulders, determined not to let nerves betray him. He had worked too hard for this opportunity. Jungkook's voice cut through the silence, low and commanding. "So, Taeyang," he said, not turning his head, "what experience do you have as a personal assistant?" Taeyang quickly gathered his thoughts. "I worked for 3 years as an executive assistant at Kim Holdings," he answered smoothly. "Before that, I handled international client relations at Han Industries. I specialize in high-profile accounts and confidential negotiations." Jungkook hummed, a neutral sound that gives nothing away. "Impressive. And why did you leave your last position?" Taeyang hesitated for half a second, just long enough for Jungkook to notice. "The company underwent restructuring," he replied. It wasn't a lie, not entirely. Jungkook finally glanced at him, his sharp gaze assessing, reading into him in a way that made Taeyang feel exposed. "I see," was all he said before continuing forward. The tension in the air thickened with each step, but Taeyang forced himself to stay composed. He was used to scrutiny, used to people trying to figure him out. What he wasn't used to was the way Jungkook's presence filled the room, an unspoken authority that made everything else shrink into the background. When they reached the office, Jungkook stepped inside fast. His private workshop was massive, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the entire city. The setting sun cast warm, golden hues across the sleek, modern interior, black leather chairs, a glass-topped desk, shelves lined with books and awards. Jungkook gestured for Taehyung to sit in the chair opposite his desk. Take a seat. Taehyung obeyed, clasping his hands together on his lap. He refused to let his finger fidget. Jungkook settled into his own chair, leaning back slightly, his dark eyes fixed on him. There was no warmth in his gaze, only sharp calculation. I accept loyalty and discretion, Jungkook said, his voice smooth yet firm. I don't tolerate incompetence, and I certainly don't tolerate betrayal. His eyes glinted, the underlying warning unmistakable. Can I trust you, Taehyung? Taehyung swallowed, forcing himself to hold Jungkook's gaze. He had known this question was coming, but somehow, under Jungkook's scrutiny, it carried more weight than he had expected. Yes, sir, he said, his voice steady. You can trust me. For a long moment, Jungkook didn't speak. His fingers tapped lightly against the surface of his desk, his expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, the corner of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't a quiet smile. Good, Jungkook murmured. Let's see if you can prove it. And so the story began. Jungkook, the powerful CEO, cold and demanding, a man who thrived in control. Taehyung, the new assistant, determined yet guarded, a man carrying secrets of his own. As they worked together, the lines between duty and desire would begin to blur. The tension between them would grow, crackling like electricity in the space between stolen glances and fleeting touches. And beneath it all, their past, buried but never forgotten, would slowly come to light, threatening to unravel everything. Neither of them realized it yet, but their fates were already entwined, and there was no turning back.